All right, so now that we've looked at home front mobilization, let's talk a little bit more about freedom, because freedom is such an important part of the American message as far as selling this war to American citizens, that freedom also will ultimately end up playing an enormous part in how we define our idea of the post-war world, and it will also come to affect the unfolding of the Cold War as well. So looking at this, the prospect of an affluent future provided a point of unity between New Dealers and conservatives, business and labor, but also to an extent united two of the most celebrated blueprints for the post-war world. And we'll take a look at each of those. The first of them is especially conservative. It was presented to us by Henry Luce in his book, The American Century, published in 1941. And in it, he insists that the United States embrace a leadership role in the international system following the war. He sought to mobilize Americans both for the war and as leaders of the post-war world. After the war, American power and values would underpin a previously unimaginable prosperity produced by free economic enterprise. Anticipating important aspects of the post-war world, but using rather bombastic rhetoric, the title, for example, it makes it easy to interpret the book as a call for American imperialism, which unsurprisingly aroused immediate opposition on the left, which offers an alternative from Henry Wallace. Henry Wallace produces his Price of Free World Victory, which is more of a New Deal liberal style work. Wallace predicts that the war would usher in a century of the common man, governments acting together to humanize capitalism and redistribute economic resources to eliminate hunger, illiteracy, poverty, and other ills. Now, while these are widely different accounts of what the world following the war will look like, both Luce and Wallace speak about a new conception of America's role in that world. Even though they are different predictions, the United States is seen to take a prominent role in both of them. Both saw the role as tied to continued international involvement, the promise of economic abundance, and the idea that the American experience would serve as a model for other nations. So, even as Congress is moving to dismantle the New Deal while the war is going on, left-wing Democrats and liberals move to unveil plans for a post-war economy that would allow all Americans to enjoy freedom from want. The National Resources Planning Board offered a blueprint for a peacetime economy based on full employment, an expanded welfare state, a widely shared American standard of living, and called for a new Bill of Rights to include all Americans in an expanded social security system, guaranteeing access to education, health care, adequate housing, and jobs for all able-bodied adults. This came to be known as an Economic Bill of Rights, and Roosevelt endorsed the idea in his presidential campaign in 1944. While the original Bill of Rights restricted the power of government, the Economic Bill of Rights proposed to expand its power in order to secure full employment, adequate income, medical care, education, and a decent home for all Americans. By the time of the 1944 election, though, Roosevelt was already pretty sick and heavily preoccupied with the war, so he really only spoke about the Economic Bill of Rights a couple of times, and ultimately Congress didn't enact it. A version, however, of the Economic Bill of Rights did make it to the floor in the form of the Servicemen's Readjustment Act. The Servicemen's Readjustment Act, or the GI Bill as it's more commonly referred to, was one of the most far-reaching pieces of social legislation in American history. It extended an array of benefits to millions of returning veterans, including unemployment pay, scholarships for further education, low-cost mortgage loans, pensions, and job training, aimed at rewarding returning servicemen and preventing the same kind of widespread unemployment and economic disruption that followed the First World War. By 1946, more than 1 million veterans were attending college, making up half of the total college enrollment across the nation, and almost 4 million would receive home mortgages, spurring the post-war suburban housing boom. This GI Bill of Rights was essentially a micro version of the initial idea of the Economic Bill of Rights. A surprise bestseller from a previously obscure American-born economist, Frederick Hayek, entitled The Road to Serfdom, published in 1944, offered a new intellectual justification for those who opposed active government. He made the claim that even the best-intentioned government efforts to direct the economy posed a direct threat to individual liberty, and argued that in a complex economy, no single person or group of experts could possibly possess enough knowledge to direct economic activity intelligently, and that instead a free market mobilizes the fragmented, partial knowledge scattered throughout the society far more effectively than a planned economy could do. This work helped to lay the foundation for the rise of modern conservatism by equating fascism, socialism, and the New Deal. As the war is drawing to a close, it set the stage for a renewed battle over the government's proper role in society and the economy and social conditions of American freedom.